Hello and good afternoon to everyone. I hope you all are good at your homes. So stay home and stay safe. Today we are going to start with Standard 10 Science 1 lesson number 1, that is gravitation. Previously we have completed the periodic classification of elements, the second chapter. So now we'll start with the first chapter. Now we'll recall what we had done in the earlier standards a little bit. So what are the effects of a force acting on an object? So what will be the effects of the force acting on an object? Now a force can set a body in motion which is kept at rest, or it can change its speed. For example, now a force can set a body in motion. For example, a ball is at rest on the floor, is pushed. If a ball you have kept on the floor and it is pushed, it will roll and go forward. Why? Because you have applied a force to it. Now a force can stop a moving body. A moving bicycle, if it is moving, now by applying brakes you can stop the bicycle. A force acting can change the speed of the body also. Now if you are riding a bicycle and you are moving with some speed. Now if you apply brakes, you will find that the speed will decrease. Now the speed decreases due to the friction between the brake shoe and the rim of the tire. You must have seen the brakes around the rim of the tires. Now a force can change the direction of the motion of the body also. Now in uniform circular motion, the direction of the motion keeps on changing due to applied force. That is when the body is in uniform circular motion. Now this is all things that are the effects, and many more which are the effects of force acting on an object. Now we'll see what types of forces are you familiar with. So what are forces you know? We know gravitational force, nuclear force, electromagnetic force. So these are some of the examples of the forces that we know. Now what do you know about the gravitational force? Now see, gravitational force, it is a universal force and it acts between two objects. Now further, gravitation, as we have learnt, the phenomena of gravitation was discovered by Sir Isaac Newton. As the story goes, he discovered the force by seeing an apple fall from a tree on a ground. So how Isaac Newton he discovered this force, that is gravity? He discovered when he was sitting under a tree and he saw an apple falling from the tree. He wondered why all apples fall vertically downward and not at an angle to the vertical. Why do they not fly off in a horizontal direction? So he had a doubt why they are falling vertically downward only. Why they are not falling an angle from the vertical, or why they are not falling horizontal. If the apple is coming from the tree, and why it is not going like this, why it is going vertically only. So here, after much thought, he came to the conclusion that the earth must be attracting the apple towards itself. So he thought that the earth must be attracting the apple towards itself, that is why it is going vertically downward. And this attractive force, it must be directed to the center of the earth. So earth must be pulling it, and the force that is directed towards the center of the earth. Now the direction from the apple on the tree at the center of the earth is vertical direction at the position of the apple. So now apple from the center of the earth, it is at a vertical position only. So that is why when it is falling, it will fall vertical only. So now see on page number 1 they have given a diagram over there. On the left shows an apple tree on the earth. So there is a earth, on that there is an apple tree shown. Now the force on an apple on the tree is towards the center of the earth. That is along the perpendicular from the position of the apple to the surface of the earth. This figure also shows the gravitational force between the earth and the moon. So here even the earth and the moon, they are having the gravitational force, because not only the objects which are present on the earth have the gravitational force, but also the objects which are above the atmosphere, that is in space, even they have this gravitational force. Newton thought that if the force of gravitation acts on apple on the tree at different heights from the surface of the earth, it can also act on objects even at greater heights, means above the in the space. So much farther away from the earth, for example the moon. Now can it act even the farther objects like other planets and sun? So actually other planets and all, they all work on this force only, that is the gravity. Now we can see that a force is necessary to change the speed as well as the direction of the object. This we had done in the earlier standard, that a force is necessary to change the speed as well as the direction of motion of an object. Now in previous standards we had done the Newton's three law of motion. So what are the Newton's laws of motion? Now the first law is an object continues to remain in a state of rest or in a state of motion until and unless external unbalanced force acts upon it. So that is the inertia. The first law is known as law of inertia also. So it will not change, the state of motion will not change until and unless some unbalanced force acts on it. Second one, Newton's, the rate of change of momentum is directly proportional to the applied force. Third law is every action force has an equal and opposite reaction forces. So this is which acts simultaneously. Means at the same time there is a reaction force also and action force also. So these three equations we have done in the previous standard. Now if you see page number 2, you will get the introduction of scientists they have given here. Now Sir Isaac Newton, he was born in 1642 and he was still there till 1727. He was one of the greatest scientists of the recent times. So see, he was born in England. He gave his laws of motion, equation of motion. He gave laws of motion, the equations of motion. These are the equations of motion. We have done in the previous standard where V is equal to U plus at, where there is a relationship between velocity and time. There is S is equal to ut plus half at square, where there is a relation between displacement and time. And lastly, it is v square is equal to u square plus 2a square, where is displacement and velocity. So here these are the three equations of motion given by Newton and the theory of gravity. So all these things there, it was published in his book Principia. Before this book was written, Kepler had even three describing laws. He had described the laws of planetary motion. However, the reason why planets move in the way described by Kepler was not known. Newton, with his theory of gravity, he mathematically derived the Kepler's laws. In addition to this, Newton did groundbreaking records in several areas including heat, light, sound, mathematics. He invented a new branch of mathematics which is known as calculus, which is used in advanced engineering, maths and physics. And he was the first to construct a reflecting telescope. So Newton was the first to construct a reflecting telescope. So this is all the work about the scientist Sir Isaac Newton, who discovered the gravitation force. Now circular motion and centripetal force. Now see, tie a stone to one end of a string and take the other end in your hand and rotate. Now once if you put the string to one end, you will tie a stone, and other hand you will put the other end of the string and you will rotate. When you are rotating, see, it will form a circle over there. Now see, are you applying any force on the stone? In which direction is the force acting? How will you stop the force from acting? What will be the effect on the stone? So as long as we are holding the string, we are pulling the stone towards us, because see, we are pulling it towards us. So there is a force which is acting, which is directing towards the center, which is known as the centripetal force. We will see further. Now see, as long as we are holding the string, we are pulling the stone towards us, that is towards the center of the circle, and are applying a force towards it. So when you are moving, see, the string will go in the circular motion, and if the string it is moving from here, you will apply that the force is directed towards the center of the circle. Now the force stops acting if you release the string. Now if you release the string, the force will stop acting. In this case, the stone will fly off along a straight line which is the tangent to the circle at the position of the stone when the string is released. over here and you release the stone, it will move in the tangent position. This is the tangent. How is the tangent? This circle, that is line. This is the line. That is the tangent. So here you will find the stone. It will move in the tangent position with respect to the position of that stone at that time. So the force stops acting if we release the string. In this case, the stone will fly off along a straight line, which is a tangent to the circle at the position of the stone when the string was released, because that is the direction of the velocity at that instant time. So that is the direction of the velocity. So the direction of the velocity is tangential. You may recall that we have performed a similar activity previously in which a 5 rupee coin kept on a rotating circular disc flies off the disc along the tangential to the disc. Thus the force acts on any object moving along a circle and it is directed towards the center of the circle. This is called a centripetal force. Centripetal force means center seeking. That is, the object tries to go towards the center of the circle because of the force. Now in earlier stand also we had given that activity where there was a disc and we have to just rotate the disc. First you have to keep a 5 rupee coin on the disc and when you rotate the disc you will find that the coin is thrown away and it goes in the tangential direction. So here you will find that a force acting on any object moving along a circle, it is directed towards the center of the circle and that is known as the centripetal force. Now centripetal means what? Center seeking. That is, the object tries to go towards the center of the circle because of the force. Now you know that the motion which is the natural satellite of the earth goes around it is in a definite orbit. Now it is revolving around the sun in a definite orbit. The direction of the moon, motion of the moon as well as its speed continuously changes during the motion. So its direction is also changing because it is a circle and its speed also constantly changes. Do you think some factors is constantly acting on the moon? What must be the direction of this force? How would its motion have been if no such force acted? Do the other planets in the solar system revolve around us in a similar fashion or force acting on them? Yes. So what must be its direction? So from above it is clear that for the moon to go around the earth, there must be a force which is exerted on the moon and this force must be exerted by the earth which attracts the moon towards itself. That is the gravitational force. So because there is a gravitational force, the earth, it tries to keep the moon intact in that orbit where it is revolving around the earth. Similarly, the sun must be attracting the planets to including the earth towards itself. Now in our solar system, sun it is in the center and the planets are revolving around it. So that is because of the gravitational force where the sun is attracting the planets and they are revolving, they are intact in their orbits and they are revolving around the sun. Now this is all because of the gravitational force. Now Kepler's law. Now planetary motions have been observed by astronomers since ancient times. So since ancient times we have been observing the planetary motions. Before Galileo, all observation of the planet motions were made with the naked eye. By the 16th century, a lot of data were available about planetary positions and motions. Now Johannes Kepler, this scientist, he studied this data. He noticed that the motion of the planets, they followed certain laws as if why they were doing. And he stated 3 laws describing planetary motion. Now they are known as Kepler's law, which are given below. Now if you see here, for that you should know eclipse. Now eclipse, it is not a circle. Now in math we have eclipse, hyperbola, parabola. Now see what is eclipse. Now you will find an eclipse is a curve obtained by when a cone is cut by an inclined plane. Now see, when you are cutting a cone over here like this in an inclined plane, now here you will get this part, what you are getting over here, this is an eclipse over here. So see here, this is an eclipse two foci over here. Now if you see, an ellipse is the curve obtained when a cone is cut by an inclined plane. It has two focal points. See, it will have two focal points and it will be at the same distance from the center. Now, the sum of the distance of the two focal points from every point of the curve is constant. F1 and F2 are the two focal points of the ellipse. Now, this is two focal points. Now, if suppose now see here, if A, B are the points on the ellipse, then you will get that AF1, see, AF1 plus AF2, it will be equal to BF1 plus BF2. So you will get AF1 plus AF2 is equal to BF1 plus BF2. Similarly, if you take one more point over here, that is C, so you will get over here what? CF1 plus CF2 all will be equal. So you remember this is the ellipse, this will be the minor axis, this is the major axis, it is having two focal points over here. Now Kepler's first law. The orbit of a planet is an ellipse. The orbit of a planet is an ellipse with the sun at one of the foci. Now, according to Kepler's first law, the orbit of a planet is an ellipse with the sun at one of the foci. Now, it means that the sun is at the ellipse position. It will be at the ellipse position. Shows the elliptical. Now, this is the elliptical orbit of a planet revolving around the sun. The position of the sun here is indicated by here. It is indicated by S. If I am writing S over here. Now, where is the sun? It is at the focal position. Any of the focal you can consider. So, sun position is the focal point. Now, we see. See, if this is the foci over here and this is the sun. Now see here, the orbit of a planet is an ellipse with the sun. Now this is the orbit. Now all the orbits which are there, it is in the ellipse structure only. It will be a ellipse only, and the sun is over here, not in the center. It is at the position of a focal point. Now if you see over here, when the planet is revolving, sometimes it is this part when it will come over here, that time it is near to the sun, and when it will come on this part, it is away from the sun. So sometimes the planets, they are very near to the sun, and sometimes when they come over here, they are very far from the sun. Now Kepler's second law of motion. The line joining the planet and the sun sweeps equal area in equal intervals of time. Now AB and CD. Now if you see AB and CD. Now, AB and CD are distances covered by the planet in equal time. That is after equal intervals of time. The position of the planet starting from A and C are shown by B and D respectively. Now see here, it is telling that in equal interval of time. Means for example, if you are taking for 30 days, it has covered this distance. So next, if you consider from it will equal to the third area. So here in this way you can understand that the line joining the planet and the sun will sweep equal areas in equal interval of time. They will sweep equal areas in equal interval of time. Now the straight line AS and CS sweep equal areas in equal interval of time, and the area ASB and CSB are equal. See, ASB, this area will be equal to CSB, and here also ESF. So this is Kepler's second law of motion. So the first, what was Kepler's first law of motion? It was that the orbit of the planet is an ellipse with sun at one of the foci. Means sun is not at the center, it is at one of the foci. I told you in an ellipse there are two focal points over here, so any point you can consider. The sun is at the focal point and the planets are revolving around the orbit. This is first law. In that, what you can say that sometimes the planet comes, when it is revolving, it is sometimes near to the sun. When it comes here, it is far away from the sun. Then the second law. Now line joining the planet and the sun. The line joining the planet and the sun, it will sweep equal areas in equal interval of time. The time taken for it to cover this distance is same. If you consider the point C also, it will cover the same distance what he has taken over here. So here the areas which are created over here, this will be also same. So this is the Kepler's second law of motion. Now Kepler's third law. The square of its period of revolution around the sun is directly proportional to the cube of the mean distance of a planet from the sun. Now see, if r is the average distance of the planet from the sun. Now here r, it will not be the radius, but here it is taken as r for the mean distance because it is not at the center. But they have just considered as r is the average distance of the planet from the sun, and t is its period of revolution. Revolution means the entire circle what it will come. That is t. So according to him, it is t square is directly proportional to r cube. This is this is Kepler's third law, where the square of its period of revolution is around the sun is directly proportional to the cube of the mean distance of a planet from the sun, where r is the mean distance of the planet from the sun and t is the time of revolution. Now see here you can put a proportionality constant over here. So what you will get? You will get that t square upon r square is equal to k, where k is the proportionality constant. So this is the Kepler's third law, where the square of the period of revolution around the sun is directly proportional to the cube of the mean distance of the planet from the sun. So here you will get t square is directly proportional to r square, or you can get r cube. So t square upon r cube is equal to k. Now this is the third law. So total there were 3 laws. Now Kepler obtained these laws simply from the study of the positions of the planet obtained by regular observations. So by regular observation just he got the 3 laws. But he had no explanation why the planets were obeying these laws. Now we will all see about those helped by Newton in the formulation of his theory of gravitation. So all these things it helped Newton in his theory of gravitation. So Kepler he gave the planetary laws of motion. Laws of planetary motion. Now see, Newton's universal law of gravitation. All the above considerations, including Kepler's law, led Newton to formulate his theory of universal gravity. So all these things, it helped Newton to formulate his gravitation theory. Now if you see over here, according to this theory, every object in the universe, now according to this theory, gravitation theory, every object in the universe, it attracts the other object with a definite force, and that is the gravitational force. This force is directly proportional to the product of the masses of the two objects. Product means multiplication. So product of the masses of the two objects the distance between them. So the force is directly proportional to the product of the masses and inversely proportional to the square of the distance between them. So here, first we see the introduction of scientist. Johannes Kepler in 1571-1630 was a German astronomer and mathematician. He started working as a helper to the famous astronomer Tycho Brahe in Prague in 16. After the sudden death of Brahe in 1601, Kepler was appointed as a royal mathematician in his place. Kepler used the observations of planetary positions made by Brahe to discover the laws of planetary motion. So, he wrote several books. His work was later used by Newton in postulating his law of gravitation. Now, here we will see further. So, I hope you have understood this Kepler's law of motion, planetary motion. Now, here if there are two objects of mass m1 m2, so this is the distance over here. Now see, this figure shows two objects with mass m1 and m2 are kept at a distance d from each other. Two objects are there of m1 mass and m2 mass and they are kept at a distance of d from each other. Now, mathematically, the gravitational force of attraction between these two bodies can be written as. So, the gravitational force of attraction, it is written as F is directly proportional. What we had said, it is product of m1 into m2 upon the square of the distance between them. So, here force is equal to G, you will get m1 into m2 upon d square, where G is the gravitational constant, or you can write it is the constant of proportionality or gravitational constant. See, here G is the constant of proportionality and it is called as the universal gravitational constant. So G is known as the universal gravitational constant. The above law means that if mass of one object is doubled, the force between the two objects will be doubled. So mass is doubled, force will also be doubled as it is the directly proportional. If two bodies are spherical, the direction of the force is always along the line joining the center of the two bodies, and the direction between the center is taken to be as d. In case when bodies are not spherical or have irregular shape, then the direction of the force is along the line joining the center of mass, and d is taken to be the distance between the two center of masses. Now see, from equation 2 it can be seen that the value of G is the gravitational force acting between two unit mass. So G is the gravitational force which is acting between the two unit mass which is kept at a distance d from each other. Thus the SI unit, the value of G is equal to the gravitational force. So value of G, what is in SI unit? The value of G is what? Unit, sorry. It is Newton meter square per kg square. See, it is per kg square, that is why that minus 2 sign is come. It is actually downside. It is downside kg square. So from denominator, if you take to the numerator, the power will get a minus sign. So that is why the unit of G is Newton meter square per kg square. And the value of G was experimentally measured by Henry Cavendish. So if in SI unit its value is G value is 6.673 into 10 raised to minus 11 Newton meter square kg. So I hope you have understood. So we'll see again here. Now the diagram which we have drawn, it shows two objects of mass m1 and m2 which is kept at a distance d from each other. So mathematically what we will get, that force is directly proportional. Where it was Newton has d square. That is the distance between them. So when you equal and put the proportionality constant, you will get F is equal to G into M1 into M2 upon d square, where G is the constant of proportionality, or it is known as universal gravitational constant. Also, the above law means that if the mass of the object is double, then the force will also be double. And if the distance is double, then the force decreases by a factor of 4 as it is in the denominator. And it is a square. Now, if you see why the center of the mass of an object is the point inside or outside the object at which the total mass of the object can be assumed to be concentrated. Though the center of mass of an object is a point inside or outside the object where the total mass is concentrated. Now, the center of mass of a spherical object having uniform density is at the geometrical center, means at its center only. The center of mass of any object having uniform density is at its centroid, means at its center. Now, if you see here, uniform circular motion and magnitude of centripetal force. Now consider an object moving on a circle with a constant speed. Now if the object is moving on a circle with a constant speed, we have seen earlier that such a motion is possible only when the object is constantly acted upon a force directed towards the center of the circle. With a constant speed, as we see in the string one, it is like that only. So when an object is moving in a circle with a constant speed, so there is a force which is directed towards the center, like we had seen in that string activity. So such a motion is possible only when the object is constantly acted upon a force. Now there is a centripetal force which is directly towards the center of the circle. This force is called the centripetal force. If m is the mass of the object, v is its speed. Now see, if m is the mass of the object and v is equal to the speed of the object and r is the radius of the circle, then the centripetal force is given by the formula mv square upon r. It is given by the formula mv square upon r. So remember this. If a planet is revolving around the sun in a circular orbit in uniform circular motion, then the centripetal force acting on the planet towards the sun must be F is equal to mv square upon r. So this now the planet is moving around the sun. Now they must be having a force acting towards the center, so that towards the sun, so that force will be given by mv square upon r, that is the centripetal force. Now, where m is the mass of the planet, v is the speed and r is the distance from the sun. If we consider that sun is in the center. Now the speed of the planet can be expressed in the terms of period of revolution t as follows. Now speed is what? Distance traveled upon time taken. Now we see the distance traveled by a planet in one revolution is equal to the perimeter of the object. Now see, distance traveled by a planet in one revolution. One revolution means is it taking a round of that one circle. Now that is the length of the circle, the boundary, and boundary formula is what? 2 pi r. So here we will see the distance traveled by the planet in one revolution is equal to, it is circular, so it will become perimeter. Perimeter means what? The boundary of the circle. The perimeter of orbit will be how much? It will be 2 pi r, as we have learned this in mathematics. So here it will come as 2 pi r. Let r be the distance R is the distance of the planet from the sun. So distance of the planet from the sun. Now further, time taken. That is period of revolution. Now period of revolution is what? Capital T. Now see, this is revolution means to take a complete circle. Rotation is different. Rotation means the planet will rotate around its own axis, because of which the days and nights are first. The earth is rotating around its own axis. But when it is rotating around the sun, that is revolution, which for us it is 365 days. Now see here you know the velocity speed formula. What you will get? It is distance travelled upon time taken. So here what you will get? See, the distance travelled, it is a circular, so what it will be? 2 pi r. So here you will get 2 pi r upon t. Now I will rub this upper part and write this again. Distance travelled is, so what we are getting, d is equal to 2 pi r upon t. Now if you see here, what was the centrifugal force formula? It was mv square upon r. Now see, v square, here you are getting v square. So instead of v square you have to put this v. So what you will get? N into 2 pi r upon t. It is v square, so this will get square upon t. So here what you will get? You will get 4. This is 2 square will become 4. You will get m square, pi square, r square, r into t. This r and this r will get, 1 r will get cancelled. So here you will get, therefore f is equal to, what you will get? 4 sorry, here m is outside, m will not get square, it is outside, only this term will get square. So 2 it is 4, pi it is pi square, and r it is r square. So here you will get 4 m pi square upon t square, and here you are getting r. Now this is what we are getting afterwards, cancelling the r, only 1 r will remain over here. So you will get 4m pi square into r upon t square. Here, sorry, it becomes t square because we are squaring both these parts. So here you will get, now you have to multiply and divide by r square. Now if you multiply and divide by r square, what you will get? F is equal to 4 m pi square into r square. So here it will become r cube, and here it will become 2 square into r square. Now if you see over here, F is equal to, here you will get 4 m pi square upon r square into, now see this r cube and t square, you just take them outside and make them separate. If you find the Kepler's third law, in that what we had, it was t square upon r square is equal to k. If you remember, it is according to the Kepler's third law. Now see here what you will get. So you will get F is equal to 4m pi square upon r square. Now here you can't write k, because k is t square upon r cube. If it is r cube upon t square, you are taking reciprocal, so here also you have to take reciprocal. So here it is the 1 upon k. So finally what you will get? F is equal to 4n pi square upon r square into k. Now, if you see over here, some things are constant over here. See, 4n pi square and k. See, they are constant. So what you will get, as these are constant, this is constant, this is constant. So what you will get, 4 is equal to constant into 1 upon r square, because r square is downside. So it is constant. So what you will get, therefore force is directly proportional to r square, because when it is a proportional, what inversely, sorry, it is inversely proportional to r square. When it is this proportionality sign is there, we put a constant and we equate it. When it is a reciprocal, we say it is inversely proportional to r square. If it had been direct, so it was directly proportional, so force is directly proportional to r square. But you will find that it is here inversely proportional to r square. Thus, Newton concluded that the centripetal force, which is the force acting on the planet, is responsible for its circular motion, and it must be inversely proportional to the square of the distance between the planet and the sun. So what he felt, that circular motion, that is because of the centripetal force which is acting on the center, and it is inversely proportional to the square of the distance between the planet and the sun. That is why you are getting 1 upon r square. That is directly proportional to 1 upon r square. That is centripetal force is directly proportional to the, inversely proportional to the square of the distance, that is r, between the planet and the sun. Now Newton identified this force with the force of gravity and has postulated the inverse square law of gravitation. This gravitational force is much weaker than the other forces in nature. So Newton identified this force with the force of gravity, and he postulated the inverse square law of gravity. And this gravitational force is much weaker than the other forces in nature. It is very weak than the other forces, whatever is there, but it still controls the universe and it decides its future. So all these things are there. The planet is there, all the sun is there, all planets are moving, the solar system is still there. Now why? Because of this gravitational force, though it is weak in universe. Now this is possible because of the huge masses. The mass the planets, stars and other constituents of the universe they are having. So because of that, this is possible. So I hope you have understood over here. Now we'll see something. Now you must be knowing about the high and the low tides that occur regularly in the sea. Now you know about the high tides and the low tides. Now that are also because of the gravitational pull of the moon. We'll see the level of the sea water at any given location along the seashore increases. At any given location it will increase. At any given location it will decrease. When it is increasing it is high tide. When it is decreasing it is low tide. We call it as flood and ebb also. So high tides and low tides they occur at different times at different places. So it will not be same. If you are in Maharashtra and the high tide, and in Gujarat if you are going to the sea, you will see it is different both the places. The level of water in the sea changes because of the gravitational force exerted by the moon. Now that is because of the gravitational pull of the moon, the level of water is increasing and decreasing. The water directly under the moon gets pulled toward the moon, and the level of water there goes up, causing high tide at the moon. Now see, the place which is directly under the moon, now that will experience a gravitational pull. So that is why there is a raise in the water level because of the gravitational pull, and you get a high tide. And on the other end, where it is not not directly under the moon, there it will be a low tide because there it will not experience the pull. So now at two places on the earth at 90 degrees from the place of high tide, the level of water is minimum and low tides occur as shown in the figure. Now for example, if this is the earth and this is the moon over here. Now see this place, it is in direct contact. So what you will find here, the water level will rise. This side the water level will rise. This place, this, because it is in direct, and here you will get a low tide. So these two places you will get high tide, and here you will get low tide, because this is in direct under the moon and these are not under the direct this thing of moon. That is why they don't come directly under the moon. That is why they are experiencing a low tide over here. Here they are experiencing a high tide because of the gravitational pull of the moon. So this is how tides, high tides and low tides occur. So read the chapter. I hope you have understood. Thank you.